August 1st, 2022. Numbers 30, 1 through 16. Key verse 2. Keeping our word. Moses said to the heads of the tribes of Israel, "This is what the Lord commands. When a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he must not break his word, but must do everything he said. When a young woman, still living in her father's household, makes a vow to the Lord or obligates herself by a pledge, and her father hears about her vow or pledge, but says nothing to her, then all her vows and every pledge by which she obligated herself will stand. But if her father forbids her when he hears about it, none of her vows or the pledges by which she obligated herself will stand. The Lord will release her because her father has forbidden her. If she marries after she makes a vow, or after her lips utter a rash promise by which she obligates herself, and her husband hears about it but says nothing to her, then her vows or the pledges by which she obligated herself will stand. But if her husband forbids her when he hears about it, he nullifies the vow that obligates her, or the rash promise by which she obligates herself, and the Lord will release her. Any vow or obligation taken by a widow or divorced woman will be binding on her. If a woman living with her husband makes a vow or obligates herself by a pledge under oath, and her husband hears about it but says nothing to her and does not forbid her, then all her vows or the pledges by which she obligated herself will stand. But if her husband nullifies them when he hears about them, then none of the vows or pledges that came from her lips will stand. Her husband has nullified them, and the Lord will release her. Her husband may confirm or nullify any vow she makes or any sworn pledge to deny herself. But if her husband says nothing to her about it from day to day, then he confirms all her vows or the pledges binding on her. He confirms them by saying nothing to her when he hears about them. If, however, he nullifies them some time after he hears about them, then he must bear the consequences of her wrongdoing. These are the regulations the Lord gave Moses concerning relationships between a man and his wife, and between a father and his young daughter still living at home. Daily Bread Message. God gives his people the basic rule of making a vow to God or a pledge to others. One who makes a vow or pledge must keep it. But there are exceptions. A woman in Moses' time lived under her father's authority before marriage and under her husband's authority after marriage. So her father or husband who disagreed with her vow could nullify it, and she was released from it. God keeps his promise faithfully, and so his people trust in him and his words. God's people are to keep their words to honor God. The basic principle for his people is that a vow or pledge must be taken seriously. God does not pressure us to make a vow or a promise. Ecclesiastes 5:5 states, "It is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it." Jesus also tells us not to make vows, but to simply say yes or no, and to be truthful. Jesus wants us to be marked by the truth that we do not need a vow to back up our words. Our words should be consistent with our actions. Our words must stand, and thus we reflect our God. Since we make a vow voluntarily, we must keep it. Our personal promises to God, marriage vows, or legal contracts must be kept faithfully to honor God. Prayer. Lord, often I break my promise to you and others and dishonor you. Please help me to keep my word. Raise promise-keeping people. One word, be a promise keeper.